Cover Killer Nation, it's time for us to strap in and take a ride on that time machine once again. It's time for us to go back to the year 1987 and start a journey. And that journey is going to be the 2011 Music Madness Champion, Death's discography review. Now today, of course, Death has the prestigious title of being one of the forefathers of the American death metal genre. And, well, some people would say that they were the forefathers of death metal in general. However, of course, death metal itself had been sprouting up in various forms and kind of showing its roots elsewhere for a couple of years. And then, of course, with Possessed's album Seven Churches, well, we all know what happened there. 1985 was whenever that was released. So whenever Scream Bloody Gore was released, well, it's whenever death metal started to really take off. And Florida was one of the birthing points. Basically, you can call it the incubation points. There were no birth pains here. It was something that immediately took off. And, well, this is an album that actually by a lot of fans could be considered to be the quote-unquote worst death album. Yeah. Surprised? Yeah, I was too. But whenever you consider that all their albums are steadily an 8.5 to, well, potentially a perfect 10, that's not saying much. That quote-unquote worst album is the best album for tons of other bands. And that's if they're lucky to even reach that sort of perilous achievement. Something that a lot of bands will never reach. Scream Bloody Gore is 12 tracks in length and 43 minutes long, which means that it has the most tracks on any death album, but is certainly not the lengthiest by any stretch of the imagination, especially once you get into the latter affairs, which were more progressively laden along with the death metal that they had coined. This is a more straight-edge death metal styling, something that really takes its roots from thrash metal, from punk, and from some of the other bands that had already spawned this whole death idea. Add some gruff vocals, some harsh vocals to something that you already know, and you transform a genre forever. At some points, and especially in the 1980s, it was just that simple. Death and bands like it were a great alternative for the thrash bands, and also an even better alternative for the hair metal bands that were really dominating the airwaves in the latter part of the 1980s. This is something that, well, while other generations were busy obsessing over bands such as Great White or Skid Row or Poison, well, the kids that were in the underground, the kids that really didn't care for all of that stuff, that didn't like the big hair, that preferred the ripped jeans and tattered clothing, the true metal style, they were listening to stuff like this. Your Metallica fans, your Megadeth fans and the like, they knew who Death were. And well, of course you guys do too now. And a lot of you do, considering you guys voted them as number one. This affair is extremely straightforward. The thrash influence is extremely apparent. And this is something that really, actually, it takes you on a journey through history, even if you listen to it today. I can imagine that in 1987 this was something that sounded so off the wall and crazy that, well, no one had ever really experienced it before. They had experienced the real power and the real just dysfunction of Seven Churches by Possessed and knew exactly how to react. It's now considered to be a legendary album, one that I may cover one day. But Scream Bloody Gore really took it to a new level, took it to a new standard. Chuck is just, whenever it comes to riffing and really making vocals that you can kind of, I don't know, it kind of scares you a little bit, but still have a ton of respect for and still kind of look up to, almost like he was delivering some sort of unholy sermon, is just powerful and crazy at the same time. It's a very timeless gruff. It's something that's only evolved over time and became even darker and denser and more layered as time went on and production got a little bit better. This has that classic 1980s edge of production where everything that's just as evil incarnate as it was whenever it was recorded in the studio still was retained whenever it came out in the final product. These 12 tracks surge by. The 43 minutes does not feel like 43 minutes at all. Instead, it feels more like you're listening to a 15-minute EP, only you lost about 30 minutes of your life in between there, and you're wondering where the hell it went. Well, those 30 minutes were actually spent thrashing your neck off because this is an album that definitely captures your attention, keeps it, and doesn't let go. And trust me, guys, get used to me saying stuff like that, because it's definitely going to be a theme throughout this discography review. There were a lot of songs in here, such as Baptized by Blood, that would remain to be standards and would be covered countless times by various bands, considering Death is one of those bands that is considered to be forefather of the genre, not to mention one of the best metal bands to ever walk the planet. Scream Bloody Gore could be considered to be their first major landmark achievement. getting a full-length album out there. But it's also seen as a scope of things to come. It's almost seen as, well, the lowest bar. Anything after this is going to be more heightened in scope. It's going to be bigger, meaner, louder, faster. Started this trend where, well, things just went up. And once they explored more progressive ground, well, Death proved themselves to be not only one of the best bands on the planet, as far as metal was concerned, but also one of the most dynamic. A band that wasn't afraid to genre bend a little bit and actually create another genre in the whole scheme of things. They went from becoming death metal, which was an evolution of thrash and punk and some of the other things that you saw, to progressive death metal, to which, well, Opeth could really owe a favor to. So their influence is legendary, just as this debut is. This is a keen starting point. This is a metal history buff's wet dream. This is an album that if you don't have, you should work to acquire. This is an album that if you have, such as me, you only grow to respect and revere. This is an album that will forever be in metal lore. It's one of the greatest debuts, especially because of what was to come. Worst album in the Death discography? Maybe. It depends on your opinion. However, the true scope of the achievements to follow? Absolutely.